Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Morris Davidson adjusted his reading glasses and studied the spreadsheet glowing on his monitor. The fluorescent lights of Henderson and Associates hummed overhead as his fingers danced across the keyboard, reconciling accounts with a methodical precision that had made him the firm's most reliable CPA. Clients loved him. Partners trusted him. Nobody suspected that the mild-mannered accountant in the corner office had once been something entirely different. "Morris, you're still here?" Christina Welch, the office manager, poked her head through his doorway. "It's past 8. He smiled, the same warm, slightly tired expression he perfected over 7 years. "Just finishing the Brennan audit. You know how particular they are. That's why they pay us the big bucks." She laughed. "Don't stay too late. Allison texted earlier asking when you'd be home." Morris felt the familiar tightness in his chest at his wife's name. "Thanks, Christina." Heading out in 10. The drive home to their Arlington townhouse took 40 minutes. Morris used the time to compartmentalize, a skill from his old life. Work Morris. Husband Morris. The man he'd been before, that stayed locked away, buried under layers of tax codes and financial statements. Allison was in the kitchen when he arrived, blonde hair pulled back, phone pressed to her ear. She waved absently, her voice dropping to a murmur as she moved toward their home office. Morris caught fragments. "No, not yet. I understand." "Yes, Daddy." Daddy. General Marcus Fry, decorated hero, political kingmaker, and a man who'd never quite accepted that his daughter married an accountant instead of a soldier. Morris loosened his tie and opened the refrigerator. Their marriage had started with genuine warmth 5 years ago, a whirlwind romance after they'd met at a military charity gala. Allison had seemed fascinated by his quiet intensity, his careful way of moving through the world. Now, that warmth had cooled to something distant and transactional. "Sorry about that," Allison said, emerging from the office. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Work stuff. Your father's work? Or yours?" Morris asked mildly. Allison consulted for defense contractors, leveraging her father's connections. "Both." She opened a bottle of wine. "He wants us to spend next weekend at the lake house. Some family time." The lake house. General Frey's compound in the Blue Ridge Mountains, purchased with money that Morris's accountant brain knew didn't match a general's salary. Morris had suspicions about the general's side ventures, whispers of black budget operations that had gone private, of contracts that blurred lines between national security and personal profit. "Sure," Morris said. "I could use a break from the city." That night, lying in bed with Allison's back turned toward him, Morris stared at the ceiling. In another life, he would have been analyzing threats, calculating angles, planning 3 moves ahead. Now he calculated tax liability and depreciation schedules. But some instincts never fully died. And lately, those instincts have been whispering that something was very, very wrong. The next morning brought rain and Morris's regular coffee with Neil Roach at Prospect Grounds, a habit they'd maintained since Morris first moved to Arlington. To anyone watching, they were just 2 middle-aged friends discussing sports and weather. Nobody knew Neil had been Morris's handler during his final years with Mossad, or that their friendship provided cover for the occasional information exchange. "You look tired," Neil observed, stirring his Americano. Allison's been distant, her father's circling more than usual. Morris kept his voice casual. "We're going up to his lake house next weekend." Neil's expression didn't change, but Morris caught the brief flicker of concern. "The general's estate? That's quite the fortress. You've been tracking him." "We track everyone who operates in the gray areas." Neil leaned back. "Marcus Fry runs a private military contractor called Apex Solutions. Officially, they provide security consulting. Unofficially, they're a wet work team operating under the radar of congressional oversight." He's made enemies. Morris felt the old analysis mode kick in. "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that get people killed." Neil studied him carefully. "Morris, if you're in that man's crosshairs for any reason." "I'm an accountant married to his daughter." "Why would I be a target?" "Maybe because accountants notice things. Or maybe because the general doesn't like loose ends, and you're a loose end he never vetted properly." Neil finished his coffee. "Watch yourself up there." At the office, Morris dove into work, but his mind kept circling back to the conversation. That afternoon, a courier delivered a package, files for a new client, Apex Solutions. Morris opened the folder and felt ice slip down his spine. General Marcus Frey's signature adorned the contracts, and the numbers, when Morris really looked at them, told a story of money laundering, ghost employees, and funds disappearing into overseas accounts. This wasn't just gray area consulting. This was systematic theft from defense budgets. Someone had sent him these files deliberately. Someone wanted him to know. That evening, Allison announced she was going to dinner with some friend from the Pentagon. Morris watched her leave, then carefully photographed every page of the Apex files and encrypted them to a secure server, old habits reasserting themselves. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You were always good with numbers. Follow the money. C.A. Clint Archer. Another ghost from his past. Another former operative who'd understood when Morris walked away. If Clint was reaching out after 7 years of silence, something catastrophic was coming. Morris pulled up his laptop and began tracing the Apex Solutions money trail with the same intensity he'd once used to track terrorist financiers. By midnight, he'd mapped out a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and payment patterns that suggested General Fry was running something far darker than a simple PMC. Allison came home at 1 a.m., stumbling slightly, smelling of wine and unfamiliar cologne. She barely glanced at Morris before heading to the bedroom. He stayed up, staring at the data, feeling the past and present colliding. The quiet life he'd built was crumbling, and the question was whether he'd be crushed beneath it or whether he'd remember how to fight. Friday afternoon, Morris left work early for the drive up to the lake house. Allison rode mostly in silence, scrolling through her phone, occasionally typing rapid-fire messages. The Blue Ridge Mountains rose around them as they climbed winding roads toward the general's compound. The lake house was actually a modernized fortress. 8,000 square feet of stone and timber, security cameras disguised as decorative lighting, reinforced doors, and sight lines carefully maintained around the property. Morris had assessed it during previous visits, noting fields of fire and defensive positions without quite admitting to himself why. General Marcus Fry greeted them in the driveway, silver-haired and ramrod straight despite his 63 years. Morris, Allison. His handshake was crushing, competitive. Good to have you here. Dinner was tense. The general dominated conversation with stories from his military career, each one seeming to contain a subtle dig at Morris's civilian profession. Allison laughed at her father's jokes, playing dutiful daughter, but Morris caught the glances exchanged between them, some silent communication he wasn't meant to decode. I'm heading to bed early, Morris announced around 10 p.m. Long week. Lightweight, the general muttered, but waved him off. Morris climbed the stairs to the guest room, changed into sleep clothes, but stayed awake. Through the floorboards, he could hear muffled conversation from the general's study downstairs. He moved silently to the heating vent, an old trick that carried sound between floors. Can't keep waiting, the general's voice, hard and urgent. He's been looking into Apex. Someone sent him the files. Daddy, he's just an accountant. He doesn't understand. Don't be naive, Allison. I ran a background check when you first started dating him. 7-year gap in his work history after college. No real explanation. Then suddenly he's a CPA? Morris's blood went cold. You think he's intelligence? Allison's voice wavered. I think he's a liability, and I don't keep liabilities breathing. The general's tone was matter-of-fact, discussing murder like a budget meeting. We'll handle it this weekend. How about Russ Gillespie bringing a team from Apex? Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Silence. Then Allison, barely a whisper, You're talking about killing my husband. I'm talking about protecting our family and our operation. You want to live like a queen or like a pauper? Because that man could destroy everything I've built. A pause. Unless you'd prefer I cut you out entirely? Morris heard Allison's sharp intake of breath. When? Tomorrow night. We'll be at the dock for the party. Gillespie's team will hit the house, stage the scene. You'll be devastated, of course. The grieving widow. What if he fights back? The general laughed, cold and dismissive. Him? He'll probably try to negotiate with them. pull out his calculator. It'll be over in seconds. Morris moved away from the vent, every muscle controlled despite the rage burning through him. His wife, the woman he'd married, built a life with, loved, had just agreed to his murder. And the general, that pompous bastard who thought himself untouchable, had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The man who'd walked away from Mossad, who'd buried his training and his past, wasn't just an accountant. He was Morris Davidson, eliminator, strategist, and survivor. And they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. Morris sat motionless in the darkness of the guest room, his mind clear and cold in a way it hadn't been in 7 years. The panic that might have seized a normal man never came. Instead, old protocols activated like muscle memory: assess, analyze, act. He pulled his laptop from his bag and opened an encrypted application hidden behind fake tax software. His fingers moved across the keyboard, accessing networks he'd promised himself he'd never touch again. First, he needed intelligence. Russ Gillespie, Tyler Kim, Jake Connor, Billy Whitehead. For names appeared in Apex Solutions personnel files, all former special operations, all with kills on their records. The general's Black Ops team. Morris studied their photos, their service records, their psychological profiles. Gillespie was the leader, decisive, brutal, efficient. Kim was the tech specialist. Connor and Whitehead were the muscle. They would come tomorrow night while the general hosted his party at the dock, giving Allison her alibi. They would expect a soft target, an accountant who'd beg for his life. Morris allowed himself a thin smile. Let them come. He drafted an encrypted message to 3 recipients, people who'd been quiet voices in the dark for 7 years, waiting for a call that never came. The message was simple. Chessboard is active. Need pieces in play. Coordinates attached. Clock starts at 1800 tomorrow. Full sanction authorized. Davidson. Neil Roach would receive it first. The old handler who'd always known Morris might need an exit strategy. Clint Archer, who'd been sending warnings through the Apex files. And one more, Trevor Lindsay, a former Sarat Mackle operator who'd gone private, someone Morris had saved during a blown operation in Beirut years ago. Trevor owed him a blood debt. Send. Morris then accessed his personal accounts. Money he'd kept separate from Allison, investments made under shell companies, assets positioned for emergencies. He liquidated $500,000 and routed it through cryptocurrency, untraceable and available for rapid deployment. Next, the house itself. Morris had mapped the property during previous visits, but now he pulled up satellite imagery and property blueprints he'd quietly obtained months ago when his instincts first started screaming. The lake house sat on 80 acres, heavily wooded on 3 sides, with a lake at the 4th. Security was focused on preventing intrusion, not on internal threats. The general had made this easy. Morris sketched out firing positions, fallback points, and kill zones on his tablet. The party dock was 800 meters from the house, far enough that gunfire would be muffled by distance and woods. The access road had only one entrance, perfect for controlling ingress. His phone vibrated. 3 responses. NR. Pieces moving. ETA 1,200 hours. Silent insertion. CA. 2 more pawns available. Equipment. TL. Blood debt honored. See you on the field, brother. Morris typed rapidly, providing specific requests: suppressed rifles, night vision, remote surveillance, medical supplies, and one specialized item he'd hoped never to use again. He looked at the time. 1:47 a.m. In less than 18 hours, the general's team would arrive to kill him. Morris needed to be ready, but first, he needed to understand something that was tearing at him beneath the cold operational planning. Why had Allison agreed? He opened his photo library and scrolled through their early days. Her smile had been genuine then, he was certain. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at him, the laughter they'd shared. What had changed? When had he become nothing more than an obstacle to her father's ambitions? Morris thought back to their relationship. Allison had always been close to her father, defensive of him, willing to overlook his faults. Marcus Fry had raised her alone after her mother's death when Allison was 12. He'd shaped her, molded her, taught her that power mattered more than principle. that family loyalty meant absolute obedience. Morris had been a rebellion, he realized now. A way for Allison to claim independence by marrying someone her father didn't choose. But that rebellion had faded, and the general's influence had reasserted itself. Money, status, access to power. These things mattered to Allison more than Morris had wanted to believe. Still, some part of him remembered the woman he'd married. The woman who'd cried at their wedding. The woman who'd talked about children and growing old together. That woman was gone, replaced by someone willing to become a widow for wealth. Morris closed the laptop and lay back on the bed, not sleeping, but entering a meditative state that conserved energy while keeping his mind alert. In 6 hours, he'd begin the final preparations. The general and Allison thought they were orchestrating a simple elimination. Instead, they'd invited death to dinner, and death always collected its due. Saturday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Morris came downstairs to find Allison making coffee, her expression carefully neutral. The general was on the back deck, speaking on his phone, gesturing sharply. "Sleep well?" Allison asked, not quite meeting his eyes. "Fine," Morris replied, pouring himself a cup. "What's the plan for today?" "Daddy's having some business associates over tonight. Dog party around 6. You'll enjoy it. Probably some contractors and Pentagon types." Her voice was too casual, rehearsed. "Sounds good. I might take a walk this morning, stretch my legs after the drive." "Take your time." Was that relief in her voice? "I'm helping Daddy prepare for tonight." Morris walked out the back door with his coffee, acting the part of the complacent husband. But his eyes tracked every detail. The security cameras, the sight lines, the thickness of the windows. The general glanced at him, then deliberately turned away, still talking on his phone. They thought he was harmless. Good. Morris circled the property, ostensibly admiring the autumn foliage, actually noting every tree large enough for cover, every rock formation that could serve as a defensive position. The woods were dense beyond the cleared perimeter, good concealment for his people. At noon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Package delivered to coordinates Alpha 3. Morris walked deeper into the woods, following old hunting trails until he found the cache Neil had left. 2 waterproof containers buried under a fallen oak. Inside were a suppressed Glock 19, a tactical knife, night vision goggles, a compact first aid kit, and an earpiece for encrypted communication. He left the containers in place, but memorized their location. No point carrying weapons that might be discovered. When the time came, he'd arm himself. Back at the house, Morris played his role perfectly. He helped the general move chairs to the dock, made small talk about nothing, accepted a beer around 2 p.m. All the while, his mind worked through contingencies and timing. At 4 o'clock, vehicles began arriving, catering staff, bartenders, guests. Morris recognized several faces from news coverage. Defense industry executives, retired military brass, a congressman known for his hawkish stance on foreign policy. The general's network was impressive and corrupt in equal measure. "Morris, why don't you shower and change?" Allison suggested. "Party starts at 6. "Sure thing." He headed upstairs, catching the general's eyes on him, calculating cold. In the bathroom, Morris activated his encrypted phone and checked in with his team. "NR, in position, North Ridge. Visual on access road. 4-vehicle convoy inbound. ETA 20 minutes. CA, Southwoods. 2 additional shooters with me. All clear. TL, East Perimeter. Medical station ready. Remember, you're not as young as you used to be, brother." Morris typed. "Rules of engagement. Let them enter the house. I want them committed before we spring the trap. Non-lethal options exhausted. Gillespie is mine." He showered quickly, dressed in dark jeans and a black polo, clothing that would blend into shadows, and made his way downstairs. Guests were gathering at the dock now, drinks flowing, the general holding court. Allison appeared beside Morris. "You should go down there. Daddy wants you to meet some people. In a minute. Need to grab my wallet." She nodded and walked toward the dock, her white sundress bright against the darkening evening. Morris watched her go, feeling something twist in his chest. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, Some part of him had hoped she'd refuse at the last moment, warn him, choose him over her father. That hope died as he watched her laugh at something the general said, playing her role as the devoted daughter. Morris moved to the living room window and watched through the reflection as a black SUV and two sedans rolled up the access road, parking out of sight from the dock. Four men emerged: Gillespie, Kim, Connor, and Whitehead, all dressed in civilian clothes but moving with military precision. His phone buzzed. NR. Targets acquired. Standing by, Morris moved to the kitchen and calmly made himself a sandwich, eating methodically while the Apex team approached the house. Through the window, he saw them fan out, Connor and Whitehead circling to the back entrances, Gillespie and Kim approaching the front. They cut the main power. The house went dark except for emergency lighting. Morris smiled and set down his sandwich. It was time to go to work. The emergency lights cast long shadows through the lake house as Morris moved silently to the mudroom. He retrieved the weapons from the cache he'd relocated earlier, feeling the familiar weight of the Glock settle into his grip. The suppressor threaded on with a satisfying click. Through his earpiece, Neil's calm voice, Connor and Whitehead breaching back door in 3, 2, 1. The sound of breaking glass from the rear of the house. Morris didn't flinch. He'd left that in trance deliberately weak, channeling them where he wanted them. Connor's inside, Clint Archer's voice now, moving toward main corridor. Whitehead covering. Morris stayed perfectly still in the mudroom closet, controlling his breathing, counting seconds. He'd study their files. Connor would clear rooms by the book, systematic, thorough, but predictable. Whitehead would follow 2 paces back, watching their 6. Footsteps in the hallway. Connor's bulky silhouette passed the mudroom, weapon raised, scanning left and right. Whitehead appeared next, and that's when Morris moved. He stepped out behind Whitehead, snake quick, and delivered a precise strike to the man's carotid artery. Whitehead dropped, unconscious before he hit the ground. Morris caught him, easing him down silently, then dragged him into the mudroom. Connor, hearing nothing but suddenly feeling alone, turned back. Whitehead, Billy. Morris was already gone, moved to the kitchen, using shadows and his knowledge of the house to stay invisible. Connor would be confused now, off balance. Good. Kim. I lost Whitehead. Connor's voice hissed into his radio. Something's wrong. Maintain position. Russ Gillespie's voice crackled back. We're coming to you. Through his earpiece, Neil reported. Gillespie and Kim entering through front. Morris sent a quick text from a burner phone to Connor's number. He'd pulled their digits from the Apex files, saying that the general lied to you. This isn't a civilian target. Get out now while you can. He watched Connor check his phone, saw the big man's face change from confidence to uncertainty. Connor might be a killer, but he wasn't stupid. The message, plus losing Whitehead, plus the too quiet house. It was adding up to an ambush. But before Connor could make a choice, Gillespie and Kim found him. What the hell happened to Whitehead? Gillespie demanded. He just vanished. I got a text saying, psychological warfare. Gillespie cut him off. The target's trying to spook us. Whitehead probably stumbled and hit his head. We find Davidson, complete the mission, get paid. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple anymore, and Morris could see it in Kim's eyes. The tech specialist was smart enough to realize they'd walked into something wrong. Morris made his next move. He triggered the house's smart speaker system, his voice echoing through every room. Gentlemen, welcome to my home. I'm afraid General Fry didn't give you complete information about who you're hunting tonight. There, Kim pointed toward the kitchen. Audio source. But Morris was already moving again, a ghost in his own house. He played this game before, in Beirut, in Tehran, in places that didn't officially exist. 4 operators against 1 target should have been overwhelming odds. Unless the target was never the prey. My name is Morris Davidson. His recorded voice continued from speakers throughout the house. Former Mossad, Kaidan Division. 37 confirmed eliminations across 12 countries. I retired 7 years ago, but it appears my father-in-law didn't do his due diligence. He watched from the second-floor landing as the 3 men below froze, their postures shifting from hunters to hunted. You're in a fortified location. Morris's recording continued. My team has every exit covered with suppressed sniper rifles. The general and my wife are at the dock, 800 meters away, completely unaware that you're about to die. You have one chance. Surrender now, and I'll let you walk out of here to testify against Marcus Fry. Gillespie laughed, but it sounded forced. Bullshit. It's a bluff. Test it, Morris's voice suggested. Send Kim to the front door. See what happens. Nobody moved. 20 seconds, the recording counted down. 19, 18. This is ridiculous. Gillespie snarled and started toward the front door himself. That's when Morris dropped from the second-floor landing directly behind them. A calculated risk, but worth it for the shock value. He fired twice, suppressed shots that punched into Connor's thigh and Kim's shoulder. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. Both men went down screaming. Gillespie spun, weapon rising, but Morris was already moving, using a kitchen island for cover. He deliberately wounded, not killed. He needed them alive for what came next. Stand down, Gillespie, Morris shouted. It's over. Gillespie answered with 3 rapid shots that splintered the granite countertop above Morris's head. Fuck you. You think you're the only operator here? No, Morris replied calmly. But I'm the only one who knew this was coming. He fired again, this time hitting Gillespie's weapon hand. The pistol clattered across hardwood as Gillespie howled in pain. Morris emerged from cover, his Glock trained on Gillespie's chest. The other man clutched his bleeding hand, rage and shock warring on his face. On your knees, Morris commanded. Through his earpiece, Trevor Lindsay's voice, we've got local police inbound. Someone at the dock heard the commotion. ETA 5 minutes. Perfect timing. Morris secured all 3 men with zip ties from his tactical bag, then disabled the signal jammers Kim had brought, allowing cell service to return. He dialed 911 himself. This is Morris Davidson at 1847 Mountain Ridge Road. I need police and ambulances. 4 armed intruders attempted a home invasion. 3 are wounded and secured. 1 is unconscious. I'm a homeowner, armed, and defending my property. As sirens wailed in the distance, Morris walked to the front windows and watched figures running up from the dock. General Fry at the lead, Allison behind him, guests scattering. The general burst through the front door, taking in the scene. His Black Ops team on the floor, bleeding and bound, and his accountant's son-in-law, standing calm and armed. What the hell is this? The general demanded. Morris smiled, cold and precise. This is checkmate, Marcus. And now we're going to have a conversation about Apex Solutions. The Blue Ridge County Sheriff's deputies arrived with weapons drawn, finding a scene that didn't match any of their usual call templates. 4 wounded men secured in the living room, an accountant with a handgun and carry permit standing calmly near them, a retired general shouting about jurisdiction and national security, and a blonde woman in a sundress looking ready to faint. Sheriff Tom Nicholson, a weathered man in his 50s, took in the scene with sharp eyes. Somebody want to tell me what happened here? Morris spoke first, his voice steady. Sheriff, my name is Morris Davidson. I own this property jointly with my wife. These 4 men, he gestured to Gillespie and his team, broke into my home with intent to kill me. I defended myself. You'll find their weapons, lock-picking tools, and communications equipment consistent with a coordinated assault. That's a lot. General Fry stepped forward, chest puffed with authority. Sheriff, I'm General Marcus Fry, U.S. Army. This man is delusional. These are my security consultants. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Save it, Marcus. Morris cut him off. He turned to Sheriff Nicholson and pulled a thumb drive from his pocket. Sheriff, on this drive you'll find audio recordings of General Fry and his daughter, Allison Davidson, planning my murder. You'll also find financial records showing systematic fraud from Frey's company, Apex Solutions, including money laundering and theft from defense contracts. Allison went pale. The general's face turned purple with rage. You recorded us? Allison's voice shook. That's illegal wiretapping. Actually, Morris replied with infuriating calm. Virginia is a one-party consent state for recordings. I was present in the house when I overheard your conversation yesterday. And since I was an intended victim of the crime you were planning, the recording is admissible evidence under the crime fraud exception. Sheriff Nicholson's eyebrows rose. That's oddly specific legal knowledge for an accountant. I consulted with an attorney this morning. Morris lied smoothly. After overhearing my wife and father-in-law discuss killing me, I wanted to know my options. One of the deputies spoke up. Sheriff, we got FBI en route. One of the guests down at the dock is Congressman Rowe. He made some calls. The general's expression shifted to satisfaction. Good. Federal jurisdiction. This will all be sorted out properly. But Morris wasn't worried. In fact, he'd been counting on federal intervention. 20 minutes later, 2 black SUVs arrived, and Morris recognized the lead agent immediately. Steve Hurst, FBI Organized Crime Division, someone Morris had worked with during a joint operation years ago. Hurst's eyes widened briefly when he saw Morris. Then his professional mask snapped back into place. Agent Hurst, FBI, he announced, showing credentials. Sheriff, we're going to need to take over this crime scene. General Fry, you'll need to come with us for questioning regarding. This is outrageous. The general blustered. I have connections at the highest levels. Yes, sir, we know. Hurst interrupted. Your connections are part of why we've been investigating Apex Solutions for the past 8 months. Mr. Davidson's evidence arrived anonymously at our field office this morning and corroborated several aspects of our ongoing investigation. Morris kept his expression neutral, but internally he was pleased. Neil Roach had executed that part of the plan perfectly, sending copies of the Apex files to multiple federal agencies, timestamped to arrive simultaneously with the home invasion attempt. Allison grabbed her father's arm. Daddy, what's he talking about? Shut up. Allison, the general snapped, then seemed to realize his mistake. He shifted tactics, his voice turning paternal. Sweetheart, go call our attorney. Tell him it's urgent. But Allison was staring at Morris now, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. Who are you? Your husband, Morris replied quietly. Or at least I was. Agent Hurst gestured to his team. General Marcus Fry, you're being detained for questioning regarding financial crimes and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. As the agents read Fry his rights and led him away, the general locked eyes with Morris. This isn't over, Davidson. You have no idea what you've started. Actually, Morris said, I know exactly what I've started. The end of your operation. The ambulances arrived to transport Gillespie, Kim, and Connor to the hospital under guard. Sheriff Nicholson took custody of Whitehead, who had regained consciousness and was singing like a canary, desperate to cut a deal. Morris found himself sitting in his own kitchen, giving a statement to a deputy when Allison entered. She'd changed from the sundress into jeans and a sweater, her makeup smeared from crying. Can I talk to my husband alone? She asked the deputy. The deputy glanced at Morris, who nodded. They had privacy, though Morris knew multiple law enforcement officers were just outside. Allison sat across from him at the kitchen table. How long have you known that you wanted me dead? Since last night. That something was wrong with our marriage? Months. She flinched. Why did you marry me, Morris? Was it ever real? I could ask you the same question, he replied. But yes, Allison. For me, it was real. I loved you. I thought we were building a life together. But you lied about who you were. I retired from that life before we met. I didn't lie. I just didn't burden you with a past I'd left behind. Morris leaned forward. But you, Allison, you agreed to have me murdered. For what? Your father's money? Access to power. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't understand what it's like growing up as Marcus Frey's daughter. The expectations, the pressure. He made me believe that without him, without his money and connections, I was nothing. So you chose him over me. I chose survival, she whispered. With Daddy, I'm protected, provided for. With you, I was just comfortable. Nice house, nice life, but no real power, no real security. Morris felt something break inside him that had been cracking for months. Comfort isn't enough when you're married to a man like Marcus Frey's daughter, is it? You need dominance, control, the ability to crush anyone who gets in your way. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Morris interrupted. You had a choice last night. Warn me, refuse to participate, call the police. Instead, you plan to play the grieving widow. That's who you are, Allison. Not the woman I married. Maybe that woman never existed. What happens now? She asked, small and broken. That depends on you. If you cooperate with the investigation, testify against your father, you might avoid prison. If you stay loyal to Marcus Fry. He shrugged. Then you'll share his fate. Agent Hurst appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Davidson, we need you to come to the field office for questioning. Allison stood, wiping her eyes. She looked at Morris one last time. I really did love you. In the beginning. I know, Morris said. But love wasn't enough when it competed with your father's approval. She left without another word, escorted by 2 agents. Morris sat alone in his kitchen, the house finally quiet, and allowed himself to feel the weight of the day. His marriage was over. His quiet life was shattered. But he was alive, and the people who tried to kill him were in custody. Sheriff Nicholson reappeared. Mr. Davidson, you're free to go. We'll need you available for further questioning, but for tonight, you've done enough. Thank you, Sheriff. One thing I'm curious about, though. Nicholson studied him carefully. That was some impressive tactical work, taking down 4 operators without killing anyone. Where exactly does an accountant learn those skills? Morris met his gaze steadily. YouTube tutorials, Sheriff. Very educational. Nicholson laughed, not believing a word. Right. Well, whoever you really are, Davidson, I'm glad you're on the right side of this. As the sheriff left, Morris's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Neil. Clean extraction complete. All assets withdrawn. Evidence trail secured. You're officially a hero who got very lucky. Drinks tomorrow? Morris typed back. I'll bring the good scotch. But first, he had one more piece of business to finish. 3 weeks later, Morris Davidson sat in a federal courtroom in Arlington, Virginia, watching as his former father-in-law's empire collapsed in spectacular fashion. The investigation that Agent Steve Hurst's team had been building for months, combined with the evidence Morris had provided and the testimony of Russ Gillespie, who'd cut a deal to avoid a life sentence, painted a picture of systematic corruption that shocked even hardened federal prosecutors. General Marcus Fray's Apex Solutions had stolen over $40 million from defense contracts, laundered money for foreign entities, and operated as a private assassination unit for anyone with enough money and a target. The general had leveraged his military credentials and political connections to build a criminal enterprise hiding behind the veneer of patriotic service. The courtroom was packed with media, federal officials, and victims of the general's various operations. Morris sat in the gallery next to Neil Roach, both men dressed conservatively, drawing no attention. On the witness stand, Allison Davidson testified under a plea agreement. She'd agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges, conspiracy and obstruction rather than attempted murder. Her testimony was damning. My father always said family came first. Allison spoke, her voice hollow. But what he really meant was loyalty came first. Unquestioning obedience. When I started dating Morris, Daddy ran background checks, financial investigations, even had people follow him. He couldn't find anything concrete, but he never stopped being suspicious. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Regina Phillips, guided her through the timeline. When did your father first suggest eliminating your husband? About 2 months ago. Morris had been asking questions about Apex Solutions, about money that didn't add up in our family finances. Daddy said Morris was becoming a problem, a potential threat to the operation. At first, I didn't take him seriously. I thought he was just being paranoid. But you eventually agreed to participate in the murder plot. Allison's voice cracked. My father made it clear. I was either with the family or against it. He threatened to cut me off completely, destroy my reputation, even suggested I might face legal consequences for things I'd helped him with over the years. I was terrified. Terror doesn't justify murder, Mrs. Davidson, the prosecutor said coldly. I know, Allison whispered. I know. Morris watched his soon-to-be ex-wife and felt nothing. The woman he'd married was gone, if she'd ever truly existed. What remained was a shell shaped by a monster, finally facing consequences. General Fray's defense attorney, an expensive Washington lawyer named Trevor Lindsay, no relation to Morris's friend, attempted to discredit Allison's testimony, suggesting she was simply trying to save herself by blaming her father. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial records, testimony from Gillespie and the other Apex operatives, and statement from victims of previous operations. When Fry himself took the stand, his arrogance was breathtaking. "I served this country for 40 years, he declared. "Everything I did was in service to national security, even if the methods were sometimes unconventional." "Unconventional?" Prosecutor Phillips repeated. "General, you ordered the murder of your own son-in-law, a civilian with no threat to national security, simply because he discovered your financial crimes." "Morris Davidson is not what he appears," Fry shot back. "I suspected he was intelligence from the moment my daughter brought him home. No real work history, too skilled at hand-to-hand combat, too observant. He was a plant sent to infiltrate my organization. Do you have any evidence of that?" "I have instincts honed over 4 decades of military service." "Instincts aren't evidence, General." The trial lasted 2 weeks. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and a dozen other charges. The general was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. At 63, it was effectively a life sentence. Allison received 3 years, with possibility of parole after 18 months, in exchange for her cooperation. She'd also lost everything: her reputation, her freedom, her marriage. Gillespie and his team received various sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. Tyler Kim, who'd cooperated most extensively, got 5 years in a plea deal. Outside the courthouse, Morris faced a scrum of reporters. He'd prepared a brief statement. "Justice has been served today. General Marcus Fry betrayed every principle he claimed to uphold. He used his military service as a shield for criminal enterprise and tried to murder me when I threatened to expose him. I'm grateful to law enforcement for their thorough investigation and to the jury for their careful deliberation. As for my marriage, that's a private matter, but I will say this: I hope my wife finds peace and redemption in the years ahead." Later that evening, Morris met with Neil, Clint Archer, and Trevor Lindsay at a quiet bar in Georgetown. They occupied a corner booth, drinks in hand, speaking in low voices. "You handled that perfectly," Neil said, raising his glass. "The humble accountant who got lucky. Nobody suspects your real background." "That's the idea," Morris replied. "I want to go back to my quiet life." "Can you?" Trevor asked. "After all this?" Morris considered. The truth was he couldn't. The man who'd walked away from Mossad 7 years ago was gone, just like the marriage he'd built. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "I'm thinking about making some changes," Morris said slowly. "Henderson & Associates offered me a partnership, specializing in forensic accounting, helping companies identify fraud and financial crimes." Clint grinned. "Using your powers for good?" "Something like that. And if occasionally I need to use some other skills." Morris shrugged. "Well, I've got good friends who understand that sometimes justice operates outside courtrooms. They drank to that, for men who'd lived in shadows but chose different ways to find light." Morris's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Davidson, this is Christina Welch from Henderson & Associates. We've been approached by 3 companies in the defense sector who need forensic audits. They specifically requested you after your testimony in the Fry trial. Interested?" He typed back, "Very interested. Let's discuss tomorrow." Neil noticed his smile. "Good news. New beginning," Morris said. "Turns out exposing corruption is good for business." 6 months after General Marcus Fray's conviction, Morris Davidson stood in his new office at Henderson & Associates, looking out at the Arlington skyline. The corner office with his name on the door, Morris Davidson, CPA, CFE, partner, represented more than a promotion. It represented a second chance at life, this time lived on his own terms. His specialized practice in forensic accounting had exploded after the Fry case. Companies that suspected internal fraud sought him out. Law firms wanted his expertise on financial crimes. Even federal agencies quietly reached out, for consulting work. Morris had found a way to use both his identities, the meticulous accountant and the trained operative who understood how criminals thought. He tracked money instead of targets, but the skills translated perfectly. A knock on his door. Christina Welch entered, carrying files. "Morning, partner. You've got 3 new consultation requests and a lunch meeting with that attorney from the Justice Department." "Regina Phillips?" "That's the one. She said something about a money laundering case involving defense contractors. Apparently, the Fry investigation opened up several other leads." Morris smiled. "Tell her 1 o'clock at Founding Farmers." After Christina left, Morris reviewed the new case files. One caught his attention, a company called Titan Security, run by a former colonel named Jake Connor. No relation to the Apex operative. Initial analysis showed patterns similar to what Fry had been running. Morris made notes, already seeing the connections, the shell companies, the flow of illegal money. His phone rang. Neil Roach. "Busy?" Neil asked. "Always." "What's up?" "Just checking in. How's civilian life treating you?" "Better than expected," Morris admitted. "I'm hunting criminals, just with spreadsheets instead of weapons. It's satisfying in its own way." "Any regrets?" Morris thought about Allison, about the life they planned together, about the man he'd been when they met. "Some, but mostly I'm relieved. I spent 7 years pretending to be something I wasn't. Now I'm integrating both parts of myself. It's honest at least." Heard from Allison. "Her attorney sent divorce papers last week. I signed them. She'll be out of prison in a few months. I hope she finds a better path, but that's not my responsibility anymore." They talked for a few more minutes. Then Morris ended the call. He had work to do. The lunch meeting with Regina Phillips was productive. She wanted his help on a complex case involving multiple defense contractors and overseas bank accounts. Morris agreed, excited by the challenge. "You know," Regina said over coffee, "I did some digging after the Fry trial. Your background is remarkably clean, almost too clean." Morris met her gaze steadily. "I had a boring life before I met Allison. Accounting isn't exactly thrilling." "Right. Boring." She didn't believe him, but she also didn't push. "Well, whatever your background, you're damn good at this work. The Bureau is lucky to have you consulting." That evening, Morris returned to his new apartment, a modern space in Clarendon, deliberately chosen for its excellent security and clear sight lines. He was taking no chances after the Fry situation. He poured himself scotch and opened his laptop, reviewing the Titan security files. Within an hour, he'd traced $3 million from defense contracts through a web of shell companies to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Jake Connor, the CEO, was sloppy compared to General Fry, but the underlying pattern was the same: exploiting patriotism for profit. Morris drafted his preliminary report, highlighting the evidence. Unlike Fry, he wouldn't give Connor advance warning. The files would go directly to federal prosecutors, and Connor would face the same justice system that had destroyed the general. His phone buzzed with a text from Clint Archer. "Heard you're tracking Titan. That colonel has connections to some bad people overseas. Watch your back." Morris typed, "Always do. Thanks for the heads up." He spent another hour on the Titan case, then switched to personal matters. The divorce will be final in 30 days. Allison had signed without contest, apparently eager to put the entire chapter behind her. She'd also released any claim to their shared assets, probably on her attorney's advice that fighting would only expose her to more scrutiny. Morris felt no satisfaction in her downfall, but he also felt no guilt. She'd made her choices. Now she lived with the consequences. A year ago, he'd been a man hiding from his past, trapped in a failing marriage, living a half-life. Now he was fully engaged, using all his skills, building something meaningful. The phone rang again. Unknown number, but Morris answered. He'd learned not to ignore calls. "Mr. Davidson? This is Sheriff Tom Nicholson from Blue Ridge County." "Sheriff, what can I do for you?" "Just wanted to let you know, General Fry tried to hire someone to go after you from inside prison. Another inmate connected to organized crime. But the FBI caught wind of it through an informant. They've moved Fry to solitary and added attempted murder charges." Morris absorbed this calmly. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff. You don't sound surprised." "I'm not. Marcus Fry is a man who can't accept defeat. He'll keep trying until he can't anymore. Well, he's not trying anything from solitary. And with the new charges, he's looking at additional years. He'll die in prison, Davidson. Good, Morris said simply. That's where he belongs. After the call ended, Morris walked to his window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, General Marcus Fry sat in a cell, his empire destroyed, his daughter estranged, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about corruption and hubris. And Morris Davidson, the accountant who'd been marked for death, stood free and successful, building a new life from the ashes of his old one. He raised his glass to his reflection, to new beginnings, and to the truth that numbers never lie. They just wait for someone skilled enough to read them. In the morning, he'd return to work, tracking criminals through financial records, protecting innocent people from predators like Fry. In the evenings, he'd continue his training, maintaining the skills that had saved his life. And in the quiet moments, he'd build friendships with people who knew his truth and accepted both sides of his nature. Morris Davidson had survived betrayal, faced death, and emerged stronger. The quiet accountant and the lethal operative had finally merged into one complete person. He was no longer hiding. He was simply Morris, hunter of the corrupt, defender of justice, and a man finally at peace with himself. The phone buzzed one more time. Trevor Lindsay. Heard Titan Security might need an audit soon. Want backup when you move on, Connor? Morris smiled and typed. Might not hurt. Dinner tomorrow to plan? You're buying, brother. Heroes always pay. Morris laughed and closed his laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to make the world a little more just. But tonight, for the first time in years, he slept soundly, with no secrets to hide and no lies to maintain. Just a man who'd faced the darkness and walked back into the light.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.